How Microsoft saved Apple. Hello everyone, welcome back to Rand's Media. Everyone thinks they know the story behind how Microsoft saved Apple by now. But in today's video, we aim to cover all the facts that you probably didn't know. If you really want to know the truth hidden behind the story, you surely could not afford to miss out watching this video. All the points that we will cover in the video will be sinking into the depths of what really happened. If this intrigues you, make sure that you watch the video to the end. Otherwise, you'll be losing sight of the actual story that took place. Before we get into the video, please tally that you've already subscribed to our bell icon. If you are new here, you would not regret hitting the subscribe button and press the bell icon to stay updated on all of our future videos. So before we jump into the very details of the story, it is necessary that you have a general overview about it. Who isn't aware that whether it is a computer, an iPad, iPod, top-notch phones, Apple has done it all? This makes one wonder what would ever happen that Apple needed a lending hand from Microsoft. We all know that in 2018, Apple made it to the first trillion-dollar company, don't we? That's not it. With every new release, people tend to rush to the stores in a crowd to literally make their purchases as soon as possible. Everyone is legitimately gaga over the new iPhone models. The paranoia is never ending. People make savings to ensure they can catch up with the latest Apple model each year. After all, who isn't excited and thrilled to stay updated with the latest technology? But that's where the story takes the turning point actually. The story isn't just tied to technology. With having said all that, it sounds like an absolute nuisance to say that there has been a time on Apple that made them go completely out of business. This is indeed hair-raising, that a company making trillions of dollars on each release could suddenly go completely out of business. So let's see the factors that targeted Apple to run out of business. And what's the noise of Microsoft saving Apple all about? 1. How did Apple become what it is today? There were numerous visionaries that clashed with one another, the vast amount of egos that had to fight with one another to conclude reality, and so much more to make Apple what it is today. Moreover, the background story of the two Steves is also something that can't be ignored at all. Undoubtedly, there is a vast amount of history behind the one of Apple, but we obviously can't discuss it all in just one episode. Like we stated earlier, we will be enlightening you on all the things that you probably didn't know. Basically, back in 1971, Steve Jobs happened to meet Steve Wozniak. At the time, computers were at their initial stages of evolution. The meeting of the two Steves was arranged through a mutual friend named Bill Fernandez. Bill Fernandez was a worker at Apple, while both the Steves had shown great passion and interest in computers. Soon after their meeting, they started to become more engaged in social gatherings. And it was during this time that Wozniak introduced the project to Jobs known as the Blue Box. The Blue Box was the earliest form of a phone, which allowed one to make direct calls from one person to another through a long distance. The method to communicate through these old phones required tones. The Blue Box would work in a manner which would ring those tones, which officially casted an entire system which could perform call routing. This would ensure that long-distance calls could be made easily, without depositing any sort of payment. Jobs was highly invoked by the device, and therefore he decided to start selling it in California. Although the idea was definitely new, it wasn't considered to be marvelous by any means. However, what still kept them going was that the duo of both the Steves was phenomenal. Wozniak was a tech expert, while Jobs had business tactics, and was a technological genius. The Blue Box was the sole reason why Apple came into being. This isn't something that we claim, but rather the statement was delivered by Jobs himself. To precisely state the exact words of Jobs, they were, "If it wasn't for the Blue Boxes, there wouldn't be any Apple. I'm 100% sure of that." Wozniak was busy at his computer club, collecting inspiration to make his computer that would be classified as Apple I. If we look at it in the modern era, it wouldn't be something that people would be really fond of. But back in the day, it would be an eye-catching device which drew everyone's attention, and people actually wanted it. If we talk about Wozniak's inventions, they were pure and smart. He never had grand ideas like changing the world or becoming a billionaire. It wasn't even something on his wish list. All he ever wanted was to educate people and reveal it to the world that the computer does not have to be a budget-breaking device. He was also determined towards his goal that he even gave off his designs as free samples. On the contrary, Jobs had a different approach. He wanted to sell the computers and definitely make money out of it, which basically came from the marketing instinct inside of him. This takes us to our next point. That is, 2. The downfall of Apple. The power that held Apple and made them different from everyone else, especially IBM and their GUI technology, the graphic user interface technology, was breaking records. The unfortunate incident that had happened for Apple was that IBM had started to hold a grasp over the technology and began to flourish. Apple, on the other hand, lagged behind in innovation, which resulted into the company creating products that were very alike to one another. This was not the only reason that contributed towards the downfall of the company. But majorly, they were unable to market their products very well, which gave chance to not only IBM, but Sun Microsystems also made their way forward and started beating Apple. In a desperate effort to generate revenue, Apple began licensing Mac OS so it could be installed on any computer. That's right, in 1995 you could purchase Mac OS to install it on your non-Apple computer. By 1996, Apple changed CEOs once again. Gil Amelio, a well-known corporate rehabilitator, came in. He fired a lot of people in an attempt to reach profitability. But it was also not enough. Lastly, let's see what role Microsoft had to play that makes them the hero of Apple. 3. Role of Microsoft. The struggle was Apple was obviously a struggle for Steve Jobs, on a whole as well. Pixar was also on the verge of bankruptcy, but that is another story for another day. Next, the company, a hardware company it was, responsible for making workstations for a higher education and also in the business market, had miserably failed on the approach, and the software then had to be pivoted. Next step ended up being the operating system for the Swiss bank organization and for the NSA. But most importantly, it caught the attention of Apple itself. Apple was looking to replace an outdated Mac OS and aimed to acquire a third-party company to do so. Plan B was a BOS, an operating system developed by a company called Copland. There was little BOS could do against NextStep because acquiring Next had an extra bonus for Apple: Steve Jobs himself. Apple bought Next in 1997 for $429 million and 1.5 million shares of Apple stock. Very intentionally, Steve Jobs didn't get any cash out of this deal. All of his compensation was in stock. While Amelio, the CEO at the time, intended to remain as CEO after Jobs returned, the board sided with Steve. It was very clear to him that if Apple was to be saved, it was him to be the one to do it. A more mature Jobs returning to the company he founded. It's the corporate fairy tale, isn't it? It's around this time that he discovered another iconic talent inside the company ranks. An aluminum-loving British industrial designer called Jonathan Ive. Apple was still struggling though. Cash was short, and Jobs turned to his frenemy Bill Gates for help. "We need all the help we can get," he said. Apple took a $150 million investment in non-voting stock from Microsoft. Not everybody at Microsoft agreed though. Dell CEO and founder Michael Dell, one of Microsoft's biggest partners, famously said that if he were in Jobs' shoes, he'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. They also partnered to bring Microsoft Office to the Mac, a key integration that led to the success of the iMac, which was released 1 year later. That colorful iMac is the first computer released under Steve's new leadership. By the way, Steve's original name for the Mac was MacMan. It was their marketing team that suggested going with an I, which was to stand for the ease of access to the internet. Behind the scenes, some changes also happened in the company ecosystem. From much better food at the cafeteria to banning pets, he wanted everyone focused on Apple. A guy named Tim Cook was also hired this year. In 1998, Steve Jobs stood at the Macwood Expo in San Francisco and famously announced his first "one more thing." Not a sexy product, but $45 million in profits. The first profits Apple has seen in years. The rest is not history. It's the story that we live today. It's the story of my generation's first Apple device, an iPod. It's the story of a revolution and how we interact with our day-to-day lives. It's the story of millions of developers building software for a product that didn't exist 15 years ago. The stories of other unicorns, built on the backbone of a fundamental transformation in the way hardware and software interacted together. Do not forget to share the history of Apple and how it made revolutionary changes with the generosity of Bill Gates with your friends as well. Make sure that you give the video a thumbs up and stay tuned for more such videos in the future.